We have to be willing to go closer to what hurts as opposed to run away from it. And when we do that, we can begin to find where it is in the physical body, and then we can breathe into that place and maybe get some movement into it. And then that, a lot of times, is what begins to create the trigger of allowing the emotion to come.
I met our next guest, Dan Smith, at the recent Mindshare event in Scottsdale. He's going to talk today about the impact of our emotions and the impact that they have on our health, the impact our emotions have on our sleep. He's going to talk about hands-on processes he used to help people release those negative emotions.
If you don't know that your brain doesn't make your decisions, that there's actually things that are going on within your body that are making your decisions, if you own at least 51% of your company, guess what is making the decisions for your company? It's these same emotional experiences that we have, whether or not we know that they're there.
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms.
Hi, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity Podcast. I met our next guest, Dan Smith, at the recent Mindshare event in Scottsdale. We connected after the last event of the conference. We immediately chatted for it must have been 2 hours, maybe more, talking about our history, which has a lot of parallels. We were both educated to be engineers. We've both struggled to connect with our emotional selves. His passion and skill set in a relatively new aspect of his life really intrigued me. He was recently on Bloom TV talking about sleep and emotions. He's going to talk today about the impact of our emotions and the impact that they have on our health, the impact our emotions have on our sleep. He's going to talk about hands-on processes he used to help people release those negative emotions. His background is serving high-level business owners as a senior advisor, which somehow morphed into the processes he created called integral methodology. Now focusing on helping those who will listen clear their unconscious patterns that are negatively impacting their everyday health and wellness. Dan, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Chris. It's fun to be here. Yeah, funny that we met at the end of that, at the end of that event, and just hit it right off from the very beginning. I mean, how many people have you heard about that knew about buckyballs and C60 from the very beginning? You know.
Yeah. The people that I can count is on my hands. That's about it.
Yeah.
In 33 years.
Yeah, that's amazing.
All right, so you currently lead groups through processes that clear what is holding them back from their health and wellness. And before we talk about this kind of unique experience, unique process, I'd like you to talk about growing up. Where did you grow up? What relationships as you were growing up can you look back on that contributed to you becoming an engineer or to becoming the engineer that ultimately developed the integral methodology?
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating question. I believe I have the unique experience, at least in my own life. I know there's other people out there that have had it, not many, but I lived first 40 years of my life emotionally disconnected as a brain, as an intellect. And it was a very, very good brain, very smart brain in this culture, and retired early at 30, 31. Started having 4 kids and investing my own monies as an advisor and investor in different projects. And over years, about 10 years to be specific, my wife would constantly say, "Are you sure you can trust that person?" I'm like, "No, I got it figured out. If they do this, we'll do this. If they do that, we'll do this and that and everything." I had all the contingency plans, and every single time I was wrong because I could not tell when someone was lying straight to my face, and I'd never had the experience that that's what's happening. I couldn't feel it. But in a corporate structure and in certain business deals, I was protected because of the structure. But when it came to me making the ultimate decision based on my lack of intuition and my lack of emotion, all I was doing was mental constructs. She could tell, I couldn't. And I was sitting there going, there's something about a woman that has intuition. There's this woman's intuition, which men don't have. And that's where I was for a little while. And then that led to the process that transformed me and brought me to who I am today. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But you asked about my youth as well. I had some very extraordinary skills. I have extraordinary skills of, which is kind of woo. It's kind of coming out of the closet. I haven't really shared this much in the past, if at all. But I have the ability just to be able to empathically feel other people's emotions and feel where they store those emotions in their body. It's a very unique skill set. It's a real gift that I have. That's what doing some of these events and also do it with one-on-one with founders and owners of very large companies, because my background is high-level business. And I'm interested in the software that's running within our bodies that is making the choices that we think we're making in our head. And I've got science to prove this. It's really pretty fascinating. But growing up, at a very young age, there was a very serious thing that happened with my family. I won't go into the details, but it impacted me severely and basically caused probably what people would call a trauma response or a disconnection from who I really was. I literally just had to wall off feeling other people because it was too painful for me. And as a result, I grew up for 40 years thinking that I was superior, that I didn't have emotion, and that other people were weak and did, because that's how intellectually disconnected I was. And that created some very interesting dynamics, as I described in business. It also created interesting dynamics in relationships. I also grew up in East Texas in Tyler, which is east of Dallas. I affectionately, or not so affectionately, call it the buckle of the Bible Belt. So literally, like, very much, I was a very good Southern Baptist boy and wouldn't have believed in anything that was supernatural or abnormal or, what I would just call different. And so when all of these things mixed together to show up when I was about 12 years ago, began to realize, oh my gosh, there's a whole different world out there, which came to me through this experience of personal development, in some different ways. And then some mentors that were into energetic chiropractic work, basically like adjusting the spine without touching the body. I know that sounds weird to some people, but that's what the roots of this are in. But it was a release of massive amounts of emotion I would have never known were in my body and locked in my tissues. And as a result, it massively changed who I am and how I see things and how I choose, what I say, what I don't, what I value. And it's been a real true gift. And it's really fascinating to say this in recorded format on something that's going to be online, because, I've never really shared this. I've done, for the last 12 years, I've kind of done this in the background, working with groups, at our home, or working with, very high end, $100 million plus businesses, founders and owners of those companies. Because interestingly enough, if you don't know that your brain doesn't make your decisions, that there's actually things that are going on within your body that are making your decisions, if you own at least 51% of your company, guess what is making the decisions for your company? It's these same emotional experiences that we have, whether or not we know that they're there. Some people know they have some stuff there. Most people don't. They call it their personality or their identity. But we get to play with all that stuff. It's much more fluid than most people would think. So I kind of rambled over a little bit there, but I'm trying to put a little capsule on
No,
what
I
we're
think it
talking
was
about.
good, right? So, yeah, I think it was good. So we got Tyler, we've got kind of religion as a core, maybe as a chasm between your kind of intuition and kind of woo things that you might throw off into. What's the justification for that? It's neither scientific nor religious, and so it can't. Like, I will not let it exist.
That's right.
How closely do you see intuition and emotion? Because I think usually when people say intuition and then emotion, they're really two separate things. But it sounds like there's a lot of overlap for the way you think about it.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the gift that I get to share, in this new part of me that's coming out through that Mindshare event. And, JJ Virgin and Tim Organ, her husband, they've invited me into this organization because they see the uniqueness of what it is that we're doing. And because of my experience of living, as I say, 40 years as a brain, as an intellect, a very successful one, I might add. Everybody from the outside would have said, I want their life. I want what they have. But even though I had, won the game so many different times in many different ways, I wasn't happy. And how can you be if you're just an intellect anyway? There's no spice to life. There's no zest. It was just, it was painful. I'll put it that way. But as a result, I have an experience of life of what it's like to live in the Western Freudian way of saying, I am my mind, I'm my brain. Most of our culture believes that's who we are. And that's why you have these concepts around the East and the West. And a lot of people in the West say, oh, the East, and what they're doing, and yogis and or Buddhists, they're dealing with the body as a much more holistic thing of, a body and a mind, of physicality, of mental wound together. We tend to separate things and say, oh, we're going to have a cardiologist, and we're going to have and then a neurologist. So we have different pieces in different parts of the body that are separated. But my personal experience has been living as a mind created lots of pain and emotional disconnection, a lot of dysfunction within my body, a lot of physical pain. I got sick all the time. Since this shift has occurred, I can feel things and I can access emotion in different places. I notice that emotions reside within different places in the body because I never could feel it before. And so as a result, I now can begin to sense things in my body that I never knew could have existed before. And I just also happen to have a very unique gift, which I now understand, which is part of the reason why I disconnected from it at a young age. But as a result, what I've determined is that intuition, to answer your question, is a combination of emotion and thought. And so what I've been able to understand more recently is that certain choices, certain thoughts, certain things come through that, and there is a corresponding feeling, call it a gut feeling or whatever it is, that comes with that thought that indicates that that is an intuitive guidance, or there's something more than just a mental thought. Like some people talk about, having too much pizza at night, you have these weird dreams, and then sometimes there's ones that have more impact. It's like that, but different. And so the cool thing is the more in touch you become with your body, which is really weird for me to even say, because for a long time I wouldn't have ever acknowledged that. The more in touch you become you will begin to understand the difference between something that's just a thought versus something that actually has more merit or more value. And that's why I think that these techniques and these processes are so incredibly valuable to business owners, as well as individuals anyway. I mean, it just doesn't matter. It depends on what's the responsibility that you have that you're making a choice for.
One of the things that you said that kind of resonated with me is like being this, we'll call it Spock. I feel like that's, the Star Trek Spock, being this brain. There was a pain there that you were probably not aware of. And maybe it's something that feels like, when you have that high pitched noise and then they turn off the high pitched noise and you're like, oh, wow, I was in a lot of pain. And yeah, I didn't know it was there. And now I can kind of breathe easy.
Yeah.
It sounds like that. Is that a fair? Yeah.
That is.
All right.
I've had several experiences like that in my life, because I had one amazing experience that really opened a lot of things up. And I called it, I was telling people I was like hearing things. So some people might think I'm going crazy or whatever it is, but I knew there was a piece to it that I had never felt before. It's like something felt like, and also has a lot of physical experiences. I literally felt like I had had like 3 beers constantly for like 3 weeks. That's what I felt like. And because my head was so light, and I remember talking to, somebody about this, and they were like, well, it sounds like you're actually connected to your body for the first time. And I'm like, that actually makes sense, because in the past I was literally my physical body was nothing but something to carry my brain around. And so as I started feeling these things, that's what reconnected me back to my gut neurons. And that's what I love. I mean, I've studied for the last 12 years physiology and what's going on in the body. And we've got the vagus nerve, which is connecting, our gut to our brain. We've got, 500 million neurons, just like the ones we have in our brain, that are literally in our gut. I'm sure you're probably familiar with all these things. But the fascinating thing is that all of those neurons are connected up through the vagus nerve to our brain. But there's 2 different kinds of nerve cells. We've got afferent nerve cells and efferent nerve cells. And so some of those nerve cells are going out and down to the body, telling our gut what to do. The others are going from the gut back up. And so what I love about this intuition and this question that you asked is that 80% of all the neurons in the vagus nerve are designed to carry information from the body to the brain. And so that means that all of that information is being utilized for something. And I believe it's all tied into intuition and then just understanding the things that are beyond the senses we can comprehend, tapping into the subconscious or unconscious.
Yeah. All right. So I want to get into a little bit. I think you've kind of talked a little bit about, we'll say like an awakening. what drove you? You worked with an energy healer, right? What drove you there? Like what got you past your brain to even go in there and like, okay, I'm gonna lie on this bed and see what happens. Like, because those are things that I can imagine. Like, I've got the same kind of engineering background. I grew up very cerebral and not very emotional, and so like, am I really gonna just lay on this bed? Like, is it even worth me laying on this bed? Because like, I know this is all bunk, right? Like,
Right.
what
It's
what
all, yeah,
got you
this is
past that, and
BS.
then
Yeah.
what was that experience?
Yeah, no, it's a really obvious, wonderful question because I don't want to work with cynics. It doesn't appeal to me because I
Mm,
was one, and I know how much effort it took for me to get into that space. And the shortcut is it wasn't necessarily a lot of effort for me to get into that space. It took a lot of pain. And so
mm,
if you are living a life that so many other people would want, and you're being told that regularly, and you're getting to travel, you're going to do all these things, you know, I sought out personal development as a way to free me from some pain that I had been through business things. And so I was thinking, oh, with more
mm,
knowledge, I'm going to achieve more success and or more peace or lower stress. That's really what I wanted, was peace and stress. I had enough success. I just didn't feel like it. And so
yeah.
when enough people are telling you how much they want your life and you're sitting here going, why would you want my life? Like I can see why you would say that, but if you knew what it was like in here for me, you wouldn't want my life. And so when there's enough pain, you end up going, I'm willing to reach out to just about anything. And so
Mm,
I had a taste test of a process that kind of had me feel something in a different way. And then that was all I needed to do. I'm like, okay, that tells me something is available here that I didn't know. And the inquisitive engineering mind, we want to dismantle things and take them apart and understand how they work. And I began to understand there were parts of me that I couldn't see and understand that were influencing me in ways. And the learner, the understander, the engineer came and said, you need to explore more of this. And it gave me the comfort and the peace to say, I'm going to throw these other things out that I believe, the structures, because guess what? Those structures haven't brought me happiness. They haven't brought me peace. So I'm willing to try some new things. What else can I do? Hurt more? Okay, fine. I'm already hurting. And so that's really what led me into the place of being
mm.
open to some new concepts.
What's the worst that can happen? I hurt more.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, what's the worst that can happen? I hurt more. Like I feel like I'm already there.
Yeah.
So you had some sort of kind of teaser. Did you end up going to like a 1 day event, multiple days event, and then talk about, we'll call it the awakening? How'd you come out of that? Like what were the releases? Like I think everybody, and maybe this is true, like wants this, oh, I had this release and everything was perfect the next day. No, typically this may not be the case for you. Like it's this kind of evolution, and things are getting better and you're moving in the right
Yeah.
direction. Talk a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, no, it's a really great question, and there was literally for me like a before and after experience. I mean, my
Mm,
experience is that, and what I love about integral methodology and the way that we create it is guiding people to find where they have blocked energy within their body. That blocked energy and or blocked emotion, however you want to refer to it, oftentimes is a symptomatic place. I had actually basically a whiplash neck injury in football as a junior in high school, and so I had always
mm,
attributed my neck pain and different things to that injury. Turns out it was actually an injury that had occurred long before that, but it was reactivated and became into my conscious awareness in that football game. But over the course of 3 to 15 years, it got worse and worse and worse. And most of my physical suffering had to do with headaches and different things that were locked into here. Well, guess what? In that original shift that had me go from not being able to feel or hear anything to all of a sudden hearing things that I then realized was intuition and information I shouldn't have had access to, weirdly enough, that came through a release of massive amounts of sadness and emotion that was stuck in here that I had no idea was there. And so integral
mm,
methodology is really helping people to understand, oh, where I may potentially have physical symptoms, even if it's has to do with like gut issues, like autoimmune or other issues that you normally wouldn't think could be emotionally related. In our world, we tend to see that they are emotionally related and they reside within the physical body, because if the body's got things that are pent and stuck, it's going to cause issues with the tissues. You may have heard issues are in the tissues. And so that initial release for me was like a before and after moment. But the process of being able to understand that emotion gets stuck and we're designed to clear it is a lifelong process. And to me, it is a way of living. So I believe that this work, the more that you do it, the healthier you become. If you look at older pictures of me, I actually look younger now than I did 12 years ago. And I believe it is a part of this work. It's the ability to move through emotion and understand that emotion, for the most part, is trained out of us in this culture. It's really trained out of us in this culture. We basically are told as children, don't cry, don't do that, don't be loud, God forbid, don't be angry. That's really inconvenient for the parents and even for teachers. And so the Prussian school system, where we put all these kids in a room and make sure that everybody sits down, behaves, and is quiet, it is perpetuating a lack of expression in different ways. There are consequences for that. So the importance is that we get to move through those emotions when the time is right, and it doesn't get stuck.
So with your work, you've kind of found, and first, first with your experience, then with your work, kind of realizing that you have a really good, ironically, a really good intuition for these emotions. You're finding that these emotions are getting bound up physically, right? So, and it makes sense to me, right? I think that you can have both things. You can bind up. I had a conversation with Deanna. She has Block Therapy. The company is called Block Therapy, and they focus on fascia release, right? So they're just laying on a bamboo block for kind of extended 3 minutes at a time in each position. It can be pretty painful, but she tells a story of digging into her stomach when she was going through a particularly hard time and finding emotion, right? And then releasing that emotion. And then now she's just on this massive, amazing journey. And she has a kind of amazing following. And because I did this block therapy and I did this fascia release, and I actually stopped, but there's an intuition that tells me I should continue doing it. I kind of know I should, I just haven't made time, that kind of situation. If we are kind of bottling up these, maybe you have a comment there, and then I have a question.
So scientists can tell when we've made a decision, which is really cool. So you can actually measure someone and you can say, okay, well, I'm going to let them, and this test has been done over and over again. It's repeated. You can say, okay, we're going to measure, skin conductance. We're going to do fMRI, different things. We're going to test when your body says, okay, I've made a decision. And then we're going to give you, as a mind that controls the hand, a button. You're going to decide what you're going to have for lunch or who you're going to marry, whatever it is. Well, you're going to push a button when you say, I've made my decision. Well, here's the weird part. The scientists in an analysis and running all of these experiments, they can tell on average 7 seconds before, on average, you would push the button. And they're going to tell you, hey, you've made a decision. You'll argue with them. You'll say, no, I haven't. I'm still evaluating. I'm still thinking about this. But every single time, and it's been proven. And so what's interesting about what you said about I should stay on this block a little bit more is that the core of this work that I'm so excited to get to share is that we don't know why we choose things. We don't. So more than likely, there can be some underlying, let's just call it fears or something within your body that's if I go there, the last time that happened, I may have been 6 years old and I was being bullied on the playground and this kind of stuff happened. And it's just, and it'll freak you out. And then the body is going, I can't go back to that place because that was too dangerous and threatening. And so the mind's job is to protect us from pain. It looks at all these patterns and it's taking the information that's coming from the body, if it's not obstructed through blocked emotion, it's taking all of that information, the sensory awareness, and then saying, get out of this situation, create this situation, do this. This is where all this is where all of the illness and the different things come from. It's like us trying to avoid the things we don't like. So that block may have been your body was beginning to feel like this emotion or something's going to come out, and this is not a safe enough environment. I'm going to embarrass myself in front of so-and-so, or I'm going to do this. I'm not ready for this. So you're touching on a very, very important part of the work that I get to share is creating what we would call a safe place where this type of work can occur. Sometimes that's in a room with other people that are there for the same reason. Sometimes it's utilizing certain supplements and things to quiet our nervous system down and our brain to allow us to go into that place. But the most important part is having a understanding of who and why we are there, who's there, and why we are there, for what purpose. And that's really where a lot of the training comes in, is to be able to understand what's coming up and what we do with it. Because many, many people will go to the place where you got to. I'm not saying this is what happened. It's just common. you get to that point of saying, oh my gosh, if I go any further in here, I'm going to break into a million pieces and I'll become a basket case and I may never recover. In actuality, a lot of times that's what is holding our personality. It's what's holding the improper decisions, which put us on the loops and the repetitive patterns in our life or business, is because we can't go to that place. So it gives us a safety to be able to go in and do it from a good place so that you could stay there. Does that answer your question in a way?
You know what you kind of added to, and I've got kind of there's a parallel that this makes perfect sense, right? Because you're talking energetics, which I know little to nothing about, right? Other than I've had a great conversation with Block Therapy. She has a big following because of the results she's getting, right? She doesn't have a big following because she's some grand speaker. She's a good speaker, right? Like because, she's a beautiful model who's laying on a bamboo block. I mean, she's a beautiful lady,
Yeah.
but that's not why she has this big following. It's because people are
Results.
getting results and real relief, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some would argue, hey, it's just fascia relief. I think you would argue it's both fascia and emotional relief from this process. And
Correct.
what you're discussing, potentially, I see this. I have a friend of mine. His name is Patrick Wanos. I'm sure I mentioned him to you, and he's an amazing human behavior expert. In my mind, I describe him as the best therapist I can imagine. He doesn't have any, official therapy degrees, but he just does amazing work. And I've seen people who are like, I need to see Patrick because this disaster just happened in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, hey, let me introduce you. You're good. And then I follow up because I care about these people and I know that Patrick will help them. And I in one particular instance, it was like, yeah, I'm saving my money for my vacation, so I'm not going to see Patrick. And I'm like, this is your subconscious backing you off. And you're maybe that's what's happening to me is like, I know intuitively it's good for, like, I need to be doing this and I'm not because it might be digging in too much. I think it's really an amazing parallel between how the mind and subconscious works. But you're just saying the subconscious is like, let me stick this over here and leave
Yeah.
it there.
Yeah, I mean, the subconscious, the unconscious is
Yeah.
so much more powerful. I mean, if you look at the, like, what is it, 60 bits per second or so that the conscious mind can follow. I mean, if two people are talking at once, you're like, at least for us men, we're like, I can't, women can do it. I don't know how they can do that. But anyway, so the point is that we can only follow one conversation at a time for us men. And most people in general can't do that. But the unconscious is like, it's like, I can't remember, 30 million times more powerful or something like that. I should know what the number is. But what we're doing is that is all being operated in here. It's below awareness. And this is what's so fun. I mean, I could tell you some absolutely incredible stories about people that have gone through these processes, and somebody that was in a business situation for a long time, like never actually owning the equity in the business, but building the business for other people. We went through a bodywork process, and he had this symptomatic place in his side for many, many years. This was a 48-year-old man. And he just never could really own himself in business and charge what he was worth. He had built multiple $100 million businesses for other people. And what ended up happening was we went through this process, and so we went in. And by the way, everything that I just shared with you came from a prior conversation a couple of years prior. He did not, this is not why we did this particular process. And so we were going into a physical place of what he was going through. We started going through our methodology. And in the process, he literally got on the floor and got into a fetal position and started crying like a baby. And in the process of that, in hindsight, what found out, he had this memory that occurred of him sitting around a round table with about 6 other children. It was probably preschool or kindergarten. And the assignment from the teacher was for them to draw a picture of themselves. And the reason that he was crying and in a ball as a 48-year-old man on the floor, just crying and speaking as about a 5-year-old, was because, guess what? All of the other children were making fun of him because his picture of himself didn't have hair, literally. And then,
Yeah.
and what that did is it created within this man, like the need to go through life, making sure that other people don't judge him and that he's the giver. He's gonna take care of everybody else because he doesn't want anybody to ever judge him, and he doesn't want to feel that again. And so when you go through those processes, and then all of that emotion can come out, it's literally like their eyes change and their whole structure changes, physical structure, posture. It is profound. And so, yeah, it's the subconscious is trying to protect us in certain ways, but this is where the interaction of the projections of who we're supposed to be and not supposed to be gets overlain on top of this very young, illogical thing called our physical body. It's like it is a child because it's not logical. It just feels and it just wants to do what it wants to do, and it holds on to the hurts. And then it sends that back up, and the mind does its weird thing, and then we become the Chris that you know or the Dan that I know, and with all our hangups. So
that need clearing, that could benefit from clearing. So
that's right.
it kind of sounds like you have the perspective that our physical body's really designed to break down when there's energetic and emotional, something emotionally is amiss. Do you have any theories on like why that is? Is it kind of just what you described of, the body is made, because some of the work that Patrick does is related to the younger you, right? So maybe the body is the physical manifestation of the younger you, and it's that simple. Or do you have any other ideas?
No, I mean, to me, I think that's really it. This gets a little philosophical, but if you imagine that there's something greater than us, God, universe, spirit, whatever it is that you would look and say that it is interested in us growing, it is interested in us developing, that our minds, a lot of times, like for me, my old version of me meant what I needed to be happy was just more. Didn't matter. I kept trying, and every time I got more, I wasn't happy. And so I was getting more and more frustrated, but my physical body was beginning to break down because I didn't realize I had all this stuff inside of me. And so we call them, there's a Sanskrit word called samskaras. And samskaras basically is, it's a Sanskrit word that basically says the definition is there's a blocked energy place within your physical body. Mind you, this is 5,000 year old, culture, 3 to 4,000 year old culture words, saying that there's places within our physical body that are creating a frequency that make our choices for us. They create our future judgments, actions, and beliefs, which, by the way, is confirmed by the scientific study I was talking about earlier. And so these things that are coming on within our bodies are designed to change us. And so my training and the teaching around integral methodology is that these samskaras do two things. The frequencies do two things. They push away that we want, and they pull in what we don't want. And that sounds a little counterintuitive, but I've seen it over and over and over again. This is why people end up in repetitive patterns. We call it the cosmic merry-go-round. You get to go on it again and again and again until you get it figured out, either in relationships or in business, and it also reflects in the physical body. It's almost like this, whatever it is that's greater than us, wants us to grow and it wants us to heal. If we had that thing happen like that guy, that man, that businessman I was telling you about, at a youth, and it's changing the way he operates, he's not authentically being himself. That's not who that man truly is. It's a compensation to try to prevent pain again. And so if you imagine that that God wants us to heal and wants us to be our full selves before that injury or that blocked energy or that lack of expression of emotion that happened in that wounding, he wants us, or it wants us, to see this healing and transformation. So life, if we're not paying attention, is going to continually prick that pain. It's going to continually show us what's missing. And it's actually for our benefit to grow and to evolve and to heal. And so as a result, I personally have experienced and witnessed all kinds of illnesses. And I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not saying this is what everybody should do. I have just seen it over and over and over again, from infertility to autoimmune to chronic pain to all kinds of things being rooted in an emotional wound that somebody didn't even know was there. And it's so many woundings and pain, kind of like my world. I got to enough pain to say, I got to try something new. That once I was able to actually have some tools and go into the physical body where I was experiencing those things and all this emotion came out, my choices changed. The way I view the world changed. And then my access to intuition or to different things changed. So it's almost like those pains are pointing us to what it is that needs to be healed. And that's where I think it gets into some really interesting conversations, which you and I talked about longevity. Like, how can we actually manipulate the body? I'm going to call it manipulate intentionally through science to live longer, if the purpose of the body is actually to tell us when we're off base or something, needs to change. I think that you have to take both. I do believe you can achieve longevity. I think that you're also going to need to listen to the body for what it is. If you get a headache, it's not because your body's saying I'm low on Advil. Your body's probably saying, hey, more than likely you need to drink some water. You're probably dehydrated, or you need to breathe a little more deeply, or, something like that. The body's like the canary in the coal mine. It's saying, hey, this is what needs to happen.
Yeah.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS 60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes. Send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code. That'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
So you start you have the experience, you have this awakening, how did you start working with people? I think if I kind of interpret, and then also the conversations that we have had before, you're like, okay, I need to know more about this. Let me get, I think, into chiropractic and maybe energetic chiropractic, talk a little bit about that. And then I want to roll into, okay, what does it look like? The help that you're giving people, what does that look like?
Yeah. Well, originally the work was a form of energetic chiropractic. And it's basically where the chiropractors, they're working in the energetic fields around your body. They're very lightly even touching you. And there's a vastly different experience level in a lot of these different chiropractors. So I don't talk about it a lot, but it was very powerful for me. But in a sense, you're sitting there passively saying, okay, is this right? Am I doing this right? Because you really don't know what's going on. And so in that process of like what we're getting to do is like, we're actually guiding people through this process and helping them to do it. And it's a different form of expression. But basically what it is, either in groups or individually through a course that we have, like guiding people into what these patterns that we would call our personalities or different things look like, so that you can understand some things that you would look like impatience or a lack of success in business. These types of things, it's not necessarily luck, or it's not necessarily there's actually emotional roots that occur that our fears are driving, influencing choices that keep us stuck in those patterns. And so it's understanding how those things relate, tying it a lot of times to a physical experience within the body, whether it's symptomatic or whether it's just qualitative. And so guiding those things and tying them together, and then giving people an actual tool where they can go in and find a place that's safe enough to be able to go in and do a somatic or body type of work to be able to release this energy and emotion that changes their lives or changes their experiences of their thoughts and the experience of their physical body. That's in essence the way we do it. Sometimes we do it with groups, sometimes it can be alone. It really just depends on the person and the type of process they're going through.
So kind of tying back to longevity, you mentioned it kind of briefly. How important do you think it is to address these emotions as it relates to health and longevity?
Well, I'll just put it this way. I've worked with many people over the years, because I've basically been doing this behind the scenes for 12 years, trying to understand, okay, how did this work, and how can we serve more people that preferably aren't cynics like me, like I used to be, and be able to give them the experience of it. And what I have noticed is that every massive shift or subtle shift that occurs within a person, as far as like the choices that they make or how they're experiencing their world, and or call it a massive relief of their physical symptoms or situation, like I said, with infertility or different types of things, is tied to a release of emotion, catharsis, abreaction. These are different words about the expression of emotion that comes out that you didn't necessarily think about. And so when that release occurs, we literally can feel the body shift. A lot of times you'll feel like joints pop, or you'll feel, tissues that were hard as a rock turn back into softness. So a lot of times when people are getting massages, to manage stress, you're getting some of the knots massaged out, but then you come back, 2 or 3 days later and they're already back. But guess what? When you actually move through these processes and the emotion is released, and there's a cathartic release, usually with, usually sorrow, sadness, tears, but sometimes anger, or fear, different types of things. These all can be locked in the tissues in different ways. But when that emotion is allowed to be released, And I say allowed intentionally because a lot of times our mind's not going to let it happen. When it's allowed to release, those tissues change. The body changes, and you see a massive shift in the eyes of the person, the tone of their skin, and the choices that they make. And that's what really grabbed my attention about this, 12 years ago. I experienced myself as a completely different person. As an engineer, I'm like, what happened and how could this happen? And is it okay? Is it okay? And then I began to say, how can I share this in more and deeper ways? And that's where all of these bodywork processes that we've done have proven to me healing occurs through the expression of emotion and release of emotion. Because a lot of times our bodies are designed to shake off those fears. Like imagine a deer almost got shot, and what does it do? It runs away. It runs away. It freaks out. And then if you've ever seen one that actually finds a safe place, it just shakes. Its whole body just shakes off. And it's like it's releasing the adrenaline. It's releasing the cortisol, releasing the fight or flight that was hitting and triggering the body. Well, guess what? In our world, we don't do that. We go from stressful situation to stressful situation, and we just kind of suck it up and bottle it up, and we never actually allow it to release. That, in my opinion, is why we're sick. It's why what we're doing is dangerous.
You'll work with groups or work with individuals. Is this, a 1 hour session, 2 hour sessions? I think you had told me that some of the group stuff is a weekend long thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does that look like typically?
Yeah, a lot of times if we do a group, it's going to be like, 3 to 3.5 days. And so you've got several different sessions, but the main thing is teaching people the methodology and our whole thing is like, I don't want you to need me. It's like, you don't need to come and do this work so that I'm more interested in leverage in business than I am. Like I want to give this and share it and let people take care of themselves than needing to come back. But there's something really beautiful and amazing about those environments. This is my favorite place in the world to be, is seeing the amazing things that happen there. So retreats is a cool place to do it, but we also have a course which is guiding people through, and it's about I think it's about 15, 16 hours, but it's teaching the methodology to understand, okay, do I have these things? Where do I have these things and what can I do about them? And then how to create a lifestyle that allows you to move through these things so that you actually have an experience of wellness and you don't get sick. I literally haven't hardly been sick at all in 12 years as a result of this and diet changes as well. I'm not saying that that's what everybody's going to have, but if you embody the work and move through it, there's some amazing things that can happen. For the last 12 years, because I haven't done this publicly, I've never shared publicly these things that I'm sharing. And so it's going to be fascinating to get feedback. But for the last, 9 years or so, I've done very, very high-end business, working with, multi-$100 million companies, with the founders of those companies to shift them so that they can raise capital. Because there's a different presence of a person that knows who they are and what they're doing and what they're up to in asking for capital and money from investors than ones that are stuck like that gentleman that I told you about, like not knowing that these childhood things are, how do I look good? How do I feel good about myself? And how do I look confident, as opposed to just being present? It's the authenticity of a presence of a heart and a mind that are presenting together. That's really one of my specialties, is working with those high-end companies. And that's where I really perfected a lot of these different things, because that's what I was doing with my intellect while my body was going, what in the world's happening here?
Is there anything that somebody could do on their own? Like, is there a smart thing, like say they're interested in going down this path, smart things that they could do like today, tonight, next week,
for sure,
that you would kind of recommend?
Yeah. So I affectionately have some jokes that I tell a lot of times. Like if we're doing a retreat, I've often talked about getting t-shirts for everybody that says that this isn't real. It just really, really feels that way. And that's like, this isn't real means your life, the choices that you make, the thing that you call everyday life. I have seen people change it 180 degrees from one day to the next because of clearing these things and releasing these things. And so what you consider real is just a process and an emotional release from a completely different way of seeing a situation or world. I've seen it happen over and over and over again. It's beautiful. So knowing that emotional release is extraordinarily powerful and can change you. The second thing that I like to say, if you wanted to have this work on a bumper sticker, it basically would say, when in doubt, scream. So literally just when in doubt, scream. Because a lot of times We in our culture have trained children not to make sounds, not to be inconvenient, as I said before, but to suck things up and to not to go into the places that are going to be inconvenient society wise. And so the opposite of that is full expression, which obviously as adults, we know that that's not necessarily appropriate. We can't just go and scream out in public. We're going to freak people out. That's why this work, when I talk about it, you have to find a safe, quiet place where nobody can hear you. Not even your spouse, not even your kids, unless they do the work like I've done with my family for 12 years. Everybody knows, oh, dad's screaming or whatever. It's like, it's not anger. It's literally an expression of allowing my body to go through what it's going through. And there's something extraordinarily healing and powerful about that because it's actually how we're created in my mind. Like what we're designed to do with this physical body is to express the emotion, allow it to release. And I can feel the difference when it's been locked into a place in a body for a long time. So what people can do is they can find a quiet place when nobody's home or go do it in a car or whatever. And then just if a lot of times people think that their pain, if I'm asking them, like if they're really stuck around a business decision or some issue where they're not really feeling abundance, they're really feeling a lack of abundance or just a common experience of scarcity. And so we talk about where and how that shows up in their business and the choices that they make. And say, okay, well, where do you feel that? A lot of times they're like, well, it's right here. And I'm like, no, that's the mind trying to prevent what it is that you're feeling. It's doing its job to pretend that it's not there or to say something different. Get out of your mind if you can and allow yourself to feel between your neck and your crotch. Somewhere in your torso, there's going to be an emotion or a fear or something that is subtly being felt that's in association with that thought. And so my job really, and a lot of times if I'm working with somebody one-on-one, a lot of times I can just feel it with my hands and I'm like right here. But other times it's guiding them to accentuate the thoughts that they normally wouldn't accentuate because the mind normally tries to run away from them, kind of like you in the block. I don't want that. So we have to actually move towards the pain. We have to move towards what's not working. And that's a fundamental principle of this work. We have to be willing to go closer to what hurts as opposed to run away from it. And when we do that, we can begin to find where it is in the physical body, and then we can breathe into that place and maybe get some movement into it. And then that, a lot of times, is what begins to create the trigger of allowing the emotion to come.
So one of your processes, I love the business parallel of I want to leverage my time. So I want to teach you to do this. I don't want you dependent on me. I don't want to be the bottleneck in the health and wellness of a lot of people. I think that's a great refreshing attitude because I think there's probably a lot of healthcare practitioners like, I want to be the bottleneck because that means you come through me and that's how it works. I think that's really good. So now somebody has this tool, this capability. Like, how often do they need to be doing clearing? Like, you've been working on this for 12 years. You've got your whole families on board, so you can go into a room and release these emotions. Like, how often does this need to happen?
That's a great question. To me, this is a way of life. It literally is a way of life. I almost do it unconsciously now. If I have something that comes up, I will. If nobody's around, I will make funky sounds and just weird things because I realize like I'm feeling it in my body in a unique place, and it's never always in the same place. You may have common things like everybody that's listening to this is going to have common places where a lot of their stories reside within their body. For me, for a long time, it was right here. And so there's occasional times where I'll feel that, but for the most part, that's been completely integrated and gone. But I'll have something different that will come up, and you'll notice the more that you do this, you will literally notice if a knot forms. Like I'll feel a knot form in my trapezius or something like that. It's like I can feel it and then I can integrate it back out through vibration and through sound and through emotion. But different things occur in different places within the body. So it's literally about creating a relationship, like a friendly relationship. Imagine that between our mind and our physical bodies, which is crazy for me because I had no relationship before. That's why I think this for me is almost like it's like a sacred experience because I didn't have this before. And so that's why I appreciate it so much. But the key is how do I understand this is happening? And anytime I have a heightened emotional or charged conversation, even in business, I realized that, oh my gosh, this is causing me to feel something. And so if I can't do it in that conversation, I will come back and do it as quickly as I can. Breathe through it, make a little bit of sound. And then it's almost like it's preventing you from getting sick. It's preventing you from building these blocks. And so I literally do this. I won't say every single day because, some days I don't, have a big thing going on. But anytime I feel something that was a little bit crunchy, I realize there's emotion. And when in doubt, scream. When in doubt, make a little sound. When in doubt, do something to acknowledge it. And what you're doing is it's almost like, imagine if you've got a young version of you that is hurting. You're not going to go kick him. You're not going to go, slap him. You're not going to say, oh, shut that down. Don't do that. You're going to go hold him and you're going to try. It's like one of your children. You're going to embrace them and you're going to love them. If you can create that type of a mentality and that type of relationship, I know that sounds a little weird, but if you can imagine that with your physical body, you're going to go a long way towards preventing and clearing a lot of the things that we're talking about here.
Okay. I love like how outside of my normal comfort zone this is. Like that's one of the connections, right? And even me and my relationship, Patrick is a close friend, has pushed me out of my comfort zone. So I really enjoy that. Can you share some of like the results, some of the stuff that, you shared the high level exec, I'm assuming he ended up with ownership in future companies. Can you share some other stories?
I can guarantee you one thing. He never went back into those types of agreements that had him doing all of the work for other people. He had actually done that for some of the same equity owners for two of those $100 million plus companies. He did it more than once with the same group of people. So that's the part that changes you. You're like, never again will I do that. And this is where you see like people that are in abusive relationships over and over and over. They don't realize the choices that they're making that are pushing away the people before they ever even get to the point of making a selection about a partner. These are the choices that are being made to bring us to healing. And so there's a really profound story that I tell in the course about, there was a woman that owned a company, and it's confidential, but company that many people would know. And there was a product, but she wanted to sell this company a number of years ago. Highly profitable product, very good company. And again, my background in private equity, I'm like, I would buy this company. Why would you be selling this company right now? You can't do that. And turns out there were some emotional things that I cannot get into that had very much to do with a particular partner that was in the business. The particular partner was not her spouse, but it was somebody else that had a minority interest in the company. And that relationship was highly threatened. And there was a lot of energy, like focus on this minority interest holder that didn't even have any voting rights, but about the money and the benefit that this person had in that company. And so this particular woman was in the process of about to sell the company when we met. And we were talking about it, and so we went and stepped through all this, and we realized that there were some emotional roots that were tied to some things that had happened in her past. And that in the conversation that ended up happening, this work that we did had nothing to do with her selling the company. This was my observation from outside of understanding, these choices don't make any sense. And usually when choices don't make any sense to outside people, it's because it's some sort of emotional root. There's something going on that's creating a decision that doesn't make any sense. And so I got to have an opportunity to go in and do body work and release a lot of things that come up. And there were a lot of things that had happened over multiple iterations, because a lot of times a core wounding creates situations where similar woundings take place and similar woundings take place. And then it becomes like a nested experience. So we had this really beautiful experience in release, and then ended up having a conversation. And this was really, it was not about the business. So what we were doing was not about the business. It was about some core woundings from a younger age. But I understood that they were tied to the situations of the holding of this partner and what was going on. And I wish I could describe it more, but I don't have the permission to do that.
Yeah.
So what ended up happening was, I followed up with her like a couple of weeks later. I said, hey, I wanted to have a revisit about your conversation about selling the company, because I wanted to basically say, can we figure out another alternative? And then she said the coolest thing. She said, oh, no. I decided that was a stupid idea. Why in the world was I like, I don't need to, like, I'm in all this growth phase and there's all this opportunity. Like, why in the world would I do that? I don't give a crap what that so-and-so thinks.
Mm.
She didn't even know that's what we were working on, but the roots tied into the situation of that. And then she said the coolest thing. She said, Dan, she said, I wish I would have met you 6 months ago. This decision or this situation that we went through cost me $120 million in revenue in the last quarter. I'm like,
Because her eye wasn't on the ball, or whatever that looks like. Yeah.
because she had already checked out and
Wow.
was already going on to the next thing that she wanted to do, the next shiny penny that didn't have this particular person involved in it. Because she could only look at that thing that was not working, not at all the stuff that was working. And so, I mean, that in a nutshell, it's a really amazing story, and I've never shared it, and I'm not going to share, the specifics of it, but that is actually what is driving so many people's decision making. They don't even realize it. And that's what's so cool. I mean, that was literally we did that process. The core of that process was like a 30-minute process. I mean, of course, the conversations and everything to create the space to do it was, several hours, but the key piece was tiny. And so you're literally talking about the amount of money that she shared. I mean, is related to a choice to go into something that scares us. Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. So just to make sure this is clear, you did work with her. The work was actually seemingly unrelated to the challenge that she was having in the business with this other person. And then of her own accord, she kind of rectified her decision making around that because you were able to release that. I have my own experiences with facing kind of little t traumas, and couldn't be much smaller, but still negatively impacting my life. So that makes perfect sense to me. This has been a fascinating conversation. I do have some wrap up questions, so I want to jump into those.
Yeah, for sure.
The first one is: do you have a target age that you want to live to?
It's a really wonderful question. My reason to live now is about sharing this work and helping people. And I think it's because I really feel like I took so much out of society for 40 years. It's like it was just all about me, and it wasn't fulfilling. And then once I received these gifts, and like the reason I read and read and read and read and try to talk to as many people as possible and have invested so much money over the last 12 years is because I want to share this. And so my answer is, as long as I'm making an impact in other people's lives and I feel like I'm able to share and serve, that's how long I want to live. And if it's 120, it'll be 120. 150, I don't know. And let's see where tech takes us and allows us to live comfortably and to really share an impact. Is that a fair enough answer? Is it evasive enough?
Very cool. And no, yeah, no, I like it because I just wrote 120. That was the first number.
Okay, cool. All right, there you go.
So
He's like,
how
just
long
give me a
do you
number.
think humans can live?
Well, there's been a lot of scientific studies that have been like, how long can you keep cells alive? And this is really, it ties into the core of this work, which is fascinating because it turns out if you make everything really super simple and comfy, the cells die. You actually have to stress them. I think that's where, like cold therapy and these things, like if we stress them, if we shock them, if we do all these different things, then cells can live longer because it creates resilience. So I think it really depends on how much tech we can put into the keeping our cells healthy and keeping our cells comfortable. Well, comfortable is not the right word because comfort actually creates, death. It creates a lack of vitality. So I honestly don't know, but I do know that you can keep cells alive a very, very, very long time if you treat them right. So
if you were to just spitball it, if you had to come up with a guess, how long can humans live?
Oh, good grief. I mean, all the cells in the body are replaced every 4 years, but I mean, they can come back just as long. I mean, well, let's just say 250. I don't know.
I like it. 250.
Yeah.
That's very good. So what are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts to longevity and a long health span that you would share?
When in doubt, scream. Yeah. And noticing one thing that I never used to do is I never used to pay attention to the energetic effects or the emotional effects of being around negativity. And so I would say do whatever you have to do to be a creator in your life to remove yourself from negative influences, even people that just use lots of negative words or lots of negative focus. The story that I just told you about the woman in the 120 million, the reason that she was in that place is because all she could look at was what was not working with a minority single-digit percentage owner of a business, as opposed to all the amazing things that she was doing. So yeah, I mean, focus on what you want, create more of it, and scream when you need to, and cry when you need to.
When in doubt, scream.
That's probably the first time you've ever gotten that answer.
Yes, it definitely is. I like it. Focus, pay attention to the impact of negativity and kind of get it out of it. Any other one that pops to mind?
Well, another way to say that is notice what you notice. Notice what you're focusing on. Is it positive or is it negative? Is it life-giving or is it life-taking?
What are 1 to 2 things that people get absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span?
Well, that's a very interesting question because we touched on it a little bit before. I honestly believe that the body is designed to tell us when we're off. So if we are not listening to the body's messages and we're not in a communication like we talked about before, like you and little Chris, if you're not in that conversation with your physical body, it is not going to allow you to live longer, because I've seen too many times when people are going through some life-threatening illness and they go through a curing surgery, it just pops up in something else because they haven't learned. But when they make that life value adjustment in their world, when they change who they're being and the choices they're making, they heal. And so I believe that we've got to listen to the body in order for it to allow us to live longer. I don't know how to put that more succinctly.
Yeah, no, I like it. The mistake is not listening to your body.
Correct.
Yeah, I like that. Awesome. Dan, how can people contact you?
Well, I've got, my old business, is The Profitable Leader. And so it's Dan at The Profitable Leader. And the new version of what we're going to be sharing, which is focused more on the energetics and the emotion, is Integral Methodology. So it's Dan at integralmethodology.com. But Dan at The Profitable Leader is kind of where we're at right now. One of the easier ways to get. So,
okay, excellent. And what in the near future are you excited about?
Well, I've got this. There's a new product that we're bringing out around sleep, which is what I'm really excited about, because so many times been going through these integrations and these processes I was telling about, people would come to me after the fact and say, "Hey, I never told you I hadn't slept through the night in 20 years, or I haven't slept more than 2 hours in the last 10 years. But since doing this work with you, I sleep like a baby." And so, insomnia is a huge thing. 1 in 3 people in the world, or in the United States for the most part, get it. Huge impact. And so the work that we're doing is to help people do some integrations to integrate the high level emotions that are creating the looping thoughts that are keeping them awake. And that's something that's going to be coming out here in the coming, couple months.
That's pretty exciting. All right, so you can find them at Dan at theprofitableLeader.com or Dan at integralmethodology.com. I got both of those right?
You did. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Excellent. Dan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Chris. It's a pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.